palace maid. She was once taken to a cold temple to await death, but then that same woman rose to the pinnacle of power, becoming the only emperor in over 5,000 years of Chinese history. People called her a tyrant. Others consider her a political genius. Was she a child murderer who seized power? Or were they victims of male historians? Today, we will explore the controversial life of the most powerful woman in Chinese history, Empress Wu Zetian. To understand why Wu Zetian was able to become the most powerful woman in Chinese history, we must go back to a time when she was nobody. No throne, no power, no military. She was just a young girl named Wu Meinuang. Wu Meinyang was born in 624, during the flourishing period of the Tang Dynasty. Her father was Von Sihuaig, a wealthy merchant who had helped the Tang Dynasty in its early years. As a result, the Wu family was considered the newly emerging upper class of the empire. However, compared to the long-established noble families in the imperial court, the Wu family's status was still much lower. Perhaps this is what influenced Von Meinyang's thinking from a young age. She understood that her background was not enough to earn her the respect of others. To stand above others, she must possess something truly special. Young age, Wu Meinyang displayed exceptional intelligence. While girls her age were learning embroidery and domestic skills, she preferred reading. She studies history, read the art of war, studying poetry and literature. They even showed interest in political issues that were traditionally considered a male domain. A folk tale recounts that, as a child, Wu Meinyang was once taken by her father to see a famous war horse. No one dared ride that ferocious horse. While everyone was talking, the little girl Von Meinyang suddenly said, "If you give me an iron whip, a hammer, and a knife, I will make it obey." Everyone was astonished. Those weren't the words of an ordinary girl. It's like a declaration from someone born to conquer. Although this story may have been embellished over time, it reflects how later generations viewed Wu Zetian, an ambitious woman who never accepts defeat. In 637, at the age of 14, Wu Meinyang was selected to enter the imperial harem of Emperor Taizong of Tang, Li Shimin. For many families at that time, this was a great honor, but few people know that the palace gates were like a giant golden cage. Once inside, a woman's fate is almost no longer in her own hands. Inside the Forbidden City, during the Tang Dynasty, there were thousands of palace maids and concubines. Everyone wanted to attract the emperor's attention. Everyone hopes to one day give birth to a prince who will change their lives. Among countless beautiful women, Wu Meinyang was merely a low-ranking concubine. No power or influence. No support system. Not particularly favored. Many people in that situation would live a dull life until they grow old in the palace. But Wu Meinyang was different. She observed, listened, learned. Each day in the palace was like a lesson in power for her. She witnessed how the concubines fought amongst themselves, how the ministers won the emperor's favor, how conspiracies are created and then disappear overnight. Gradually, the young woman began to understand the workings of power, and most importantly, she realized that in this world, power is more trustworthy than love. Those seemingly meaningless years in the imperial harem had silently transformed Wu Meinyang into a completely different person. A woman who knows how to wait for the right opportunity. A woman who is willing to go to great lengths to achieve her goals. But the greatest opportunity of her life has yet to present itself. It came from a young man. This person would later become the emperor of the Tang Dynasty. And he was also the one who brought Wu Meinyang closer to the throne than anyone else. During her time serving in the imperial harem of Emperor Taizong of Tang, Wu Meinyang met Crown Prince Li Ji, the emperor's ninth son. He later became known in history as Emperor Gaozong of Tang. Compared to his famous father, Li Shimin, Li Ji had a completely different personality. He was kind, calm, less decisive. It was this very contrast that led many people to underestimate him. But it wasn't Von Meinyang. She quickly realized that this young prince could be the key to changing her destiny. Historical records do not clearly state when the two began to become close. However, many researchers believe that their feelings for each other developed when Wu Meinyang was a concubine of Emperor Taizong of Tang. If that were true, it would be one of the most controversial relationships in Chinese history. Because, in name, Wu Meinyang was still her father's concubine. Li Ji was the emperor's son. However, history does not always operate according to moral rules. The year 649, Emperor Taizong of Tang has passed away. The entire empire was plunged into mourning. For many, this marks the end of a glorious era. As for Von Meinyang, this is the end of her future. According to the regulations of the Tang Dynasty, concubines who did not bear children for the emperor had to shave their heads and become nuns after the emperor's death. At that time, Von Meinyang was only about 25 years old. Youth, beauty, ambition, everything seems to be buried behind the gates of Kam Nyep Temple. On the day she left the palace, Many believed they would never see her again, but history sometimes likes to create unexpected twists and turns. During her time at the temple, Von Mitnung never gave up hope. She understood that as long as she was alive, there was still a chance. Meanwhile, at the imperial palace, Li Ji ascended the throne to become Emperor Gaozong of Tang. Even after becoming emperor, he never forgot the woman who had once captivated him. About 2 years later, during a visit to the Kamgip temple to offer incense, Emperor Gaozong of Tang met Wu Meiniang again. That encounter changed everything. According to legend, when they saw each other, neither could hide their emotions. The woman who once lived in luxury now dons the simple habit of a nun. But her beauty and grace have not faded at all. Emperor Gaozong was captivated once again. Shortly afterwards, he secretly brought Von Mitnung back to the imperial palace. This event sent shockwaves through the imperial harem. Many people objected, because, according to the prevailing views of the time, it was considered very sensitive for an emperor to appoint his father's concubine as his own. But Emperor Gaozong of Tang remained determined to carry it out. From a nun who seemed to have been forgotten, Von Mitnung returned to the palace in glory. And this time, she was no longer the innocent girl she once was. Her years in the royal palace and temples taught her so much. She understood that second chances rarely come. If she wanted to change her destiny, she had to seize it. Not long after returning to the palace, Wu Meiniang quickly became the most favored concubine. This caused Empress Wang and consort Xiao to worry greatly. They had no idea that the woman who had just returned from the temple would soon change the entire course of the Tang Dynasty. The bloodiest power struggle in the history of the Chinese imperial harem is about to begin, and Von Mitnung will be the ultimate winner. The year 654. Von Mitnung gave birth to a baby girl, but just a few days later, the child suddenly passed away. At that time, the last person to see the baby was Queen Mother. Von Mitnung immediately accused Empress Wu of killing her child. Emperor Gaozong was furious. Queen Wan was deposed. Von Mitnung ascended to the throne as empress. However, hundreds of years later, a terrible rumor emerged. Many historians believe that Wu Meiniang herself strangled her own daughter to frame the empress. To this day, no one knows the truth, but from this point on, the image of Empress Wu Zetian began to be associated with cruelty and ambition. After becoming empress in 655, Wu Meiniang finally achieved a goal that many concubines in the imperial harem dreamed of. But for her, this was just the beginning. Because she understood one thing clearly. In the Tang Dynasty imperial court, power was never something that could be held onto forever. If you're not strong enough, today is the winner. Tomorrow, you might become a failure. And Von Mitnung would not allow that to happen. Immediately after being crowned empress, her first action was to completely eliminate anyone who could threaten her position. The ones who suffered the most severe consequences were Empress Wang and concubine Xiao. These two were once Von Mitnung's biggest rivals in the imperial harem. According to historical records, after being deposed, both were imprisoned in dark rooms, completely isolated from the outside world. Initially, Emperor Gaozong of Tang still felt some compassion. During a secret visit, he found the two of them in a terrible state. That made him consider forgiving. When she learned of this, Wu Meiniang immediately became furious. She understood that as long as the two of them were, they could still pose a danger in the future. Not long after, one of the most controversial events in Chinese history occurred. Many documents record that Empress Wang and concubine Xiao were executed in an extremely cruel manner. There are even records suggesting that their limbs were severed before being placed in jars of wine. However, due to the inconsistent nature of the sources, modern researchers still debate the accuracy of this story. But whatever the truth may be, one thing is undeniable. From that moment on, the entire imperial harem understood that Empress Von was not someone to be easily opposed. Her reputation began to strike fear into many people. However, the imperial harem was only a very small part of the power struggle. Her real enemies lay within the royal court. Many veteran high-ranking officials did not accept a woman's deep involvement in political affairs. They repeatedly submitted petitions of protest. Some people openly criticized Empress Von in front of the emperor. These people quickly became targets. The person was demoted, an exile. People lost their lives in mysterious cases. Gradually, the voices of protest began to fade away. Meanwhile, Empress Von actively placed her loyal followers in important positions. A vast network of power was formed. Not just in the imperial harem, not just in the royal court, and it spans the entire empire. As Emperor Gaozong's health deteriorated, Empress Wu's power grew even greater. On many occasions, she was directly involved in handling official documents. They even made decisions on behalf of the emperor. The ministers gradually realized that the person sitting on the throne could be Emperor Gaozong of Tang. But the person who actually ruled the country was Empress Vo. To protect her power, she went on to build an unprecedented surveillance system. Secret spies were planted everywhere, from the capital city to the most remote regions. Anyone suspected of dissent may be investigated. Among the most famous figures of this period was Li Junqian, an official specializing in handling political cases. His name quickly became a source of dread for the officials. Just being placed on an investigation list meant many people knew their future was pretty much over. A series of harsh interrogations took place. Many confessions were made under immense pressure. No one knows exactly how many people have fallen victim to this system, but fear had spread throughout the court. Some officials even thought that every time they received a summons, it might be the last day of their lives. Ironically, it was precisely this firmness that helped Wu Zetian consolidate her power. Absolutely. The opposing factions were gradually eliminated. The families that had manipulated the court for generations began to decline. For the first time in years, central power is concentrated in a single individual. That was Empress Vo. And then, all the biggest rivals have disappeared. When there was no one left in the court strong enough to challenge them, even the emperor himself became increasingly dependent on her. An idea began to form in Wu Zetian's mind. If she had the power of an emperor, so why does she still have to stand behind the throne? That was the premise for the boldest decision of her life. A decision that would completely change the course of Chinese history. It means stepping onto the throne and becoming emperor yourself. The year 683. Emperor Gaozong of Tang has passed away. The death of this emperor marked a major turning point in the history of the Tang Dynasty. But for Empress Wu Zetian, this was not the end. But it was the moment she officially stepped into the spotlight. Nominally, the throne was passed to Crown Prince Li Hyun. He became Emperor Zhongzong of Tang. However, the new emperor had virtually no real power. All important decisions rested in the hands of Empress Dowager Wu Zetian. The ministers quickly realized that the true ruler of the empire was not the young emperor, but the woman sitting behind the regent's curtain. Initially, Li Xian accepted it, but as time went on, he increasingly wanted to break free from his mother's control. Just after ascending the throne, Emperor Zhongzong of Tang began arbitrarily appointing relatives to important positions. He also planned to grant significant power to the Wei family on the empress's side. Upon hearing this news, Empress Wu Zetian immediately took action. She believed her son was following in the footsteps of weak kings, and more dangerously, it could threaten the power she has spent decades building. Without a moment's hesitation, Empress Wu Zetian deposed her own son. Li Xian was exiled from the capital. His replacement was his younger brother, Li Dan. But the situation hasn't changed. Li Dan was only a king in name. All power rested in the hands of Empress Dowager Von. This was the period when her power reached its peak. The opposing ministers gradually disappeared from the court. Loyal people are promoted. The governing apparatus gradually came under her complete control. However, there was one issue that continued to trouble Empress Wu Zetian. She held de facto power, but nominally, she was still only the Empress Dowager. A woman stands behind the throne. That's not enough. After years of building her influence, Empress Wu Zetian began to implement the most audacious plan of her life. A plan that no woman in Chinese history had ever dared to conceive. That is, to become emperor. For thousands of years, Confucian thought has consistently affirmed that men are the rulers of the world. Women must be submissive. The idea of a woman ascending to the throne as emperor was considered utopian. It even offends the natural order of things. But Empress Wu Zetian didn't care. She commissioned closed scholars to compile documents asserting that she was chosen by God. Mysterious prophecies began to appear. Many people propagated the idea that the mandate of heaven had shifted from the Tang Dynasty to the Wu Dynasty. Natural phenomena were interpreted as harbingers of the arrival of a new, wise ruler. Everything was carefully prepared. The year 690. The historic moment has finally arrived. The officials unanimously submitted petitions demanding that Wu Zetian ascend to the throne. Of course, this is no coincidence. Everything had been planned in advance. After several symbolic refusals, Empress Wu Zetian officially accepted. She declared the establishment of a new dynasty called Wu Zhou. The Tang Dynasty came to a temporary end. Li Dan was demoted to the rank of crown prince, and Wu Zetian officially declared herself empress. Not the empress, not the Empress Dowager, but he is the emperor, the only woman in all of Chinese history to become emperor. That moment shook the entire empire. For her supporters, this was a victory of talent over outdated prejudices. But for those loyal to the Tang Dynasty, this was an unprecedented usurpation of power. Whether you love or hate her, no one can deny that Wu Zetian accomplished something that no one had dared to do for thousands of years. She broke the biggest rule of feudal Chinese society and ascended to the highest position in the world. At that moment, a completely new chapter in history began. Even today, historians are unable to reach a consensus when discussing Empress Wu Zetian. Was she a bloodthirsty tyrant? Was he one of the most talented rulers in Chinese history? Perhaps this is the most controversial question over the past 1,000 years. Considering what she did to seize power, it's difficult to deny Wu Zetian's ruthlessness. A series of political opponents were executed. Many high-ranking officials, loyal to the Tang Dynasty, were accused of treason. Members of the royal family were repeatedly exiled or forced to commit suicide. The royal court at that time was like an invisible battlefield. No one knows whether they will still be alive tomorrow. Just one accusation appearing in the confidential reports could implicate the entire family. To control her vast empire, Empress Wu built a massive spy network. Her spies were everywhere. From local officials to high-ranking ministers in the imperial court, every word action could be reported to the emperor. People at that time even spread the word among themselves that the emperor's eyes and ears are everywhere in the world. Fear becomes the most effective tool of governance. But strangely, amidst that atmosphere of fear, the country flourished more than ever before. Upon assuming power, Empress Wu Zetian realized a major problem. For centuries, important positions in the royal court were almost exclusively occupied by long-established aristocratic families. Descendants of influential families only need to have a good background to become officials. Meanwhile, truly talented people find it very difficult to break into positions of power. Empress Wu Zetian decided to change that. She expanded the examination system. For the first time in the history of the Tang Dynasty, people from humble backgrounds had the opportunity to advance through education. More and more talented individuals are being selected through a talent pool rather than relying solely on family lineage. This decision weakened the power of the aristocracy and provided the court with more truly capable officials. Not only that, she also placed particular emphasis on agriculture. Many types of taxes have been adjusted to be more reasonable. Abandoned land is being reclaimed for cultivation. Irrigation works were repaired and expanded. As a result, food production increased significantly. Many regions that were once frequently plagued by famine are beginning to stabilize. Historical records indicate that during several years under Empress Wu Zetian's reign, the harvests were so abundant that the imperial granaries were almost overflowing. Economic development leads to the expansion of trade. The trade routes along the Silk Road became bustling. Goods from Central Asia, Persia, and many distant lands continued to flow into Chang'an and Luoyang. Under her rule, the Tang Dynasty maintained its position as one of the most powerful nations in the world. Another noteworthy aspect is her approach to utilizing talent. Unlike many emperors, who only trusted relatives or powerful families, Empress Wu Zetian was willing to employ anyone with ability, as long as that person is loyal and works effectively. Despite their humble origins or lack of political backing, they still have opportunities for advancement. This helped the court function much more efficiently. However, these achievements could not erase the dark side of her rule. Many scholars argue that a nation's prosperity is built on a foundation of fear. Absolute power silences any dissenting voices. The successive purges left countless tragedies for aristocratic and official families. Therefore, the image of Empress Wu Zetian always presents two opposing sides. In the eyes of those who hated her, she was a tyrant, willing to do anything to keep her throne. But in the eyes of many modern researchers, she was an outstanding reformer who broke down the outdated barriers of feudal society and proved that leadership ability does not depend on gender. Perhaps the truth lies in the middle. Empress Wu Zetian was not a saint, but she wasn't simply a demon, as many ancient historical accounts have described her. She was an extremely intelligent, decisive, and ambitious ruler. One woman used both talent and ruthlessness to write a chapter in history unlike anything seen before in over 5,000 years of Chinese civilization. And that is why, after more than a millennium, the name Wu Zetian is still a subject of endless debate. As she grew older and weaker, Empress Wu Zetian became increasingly dependent on the Zhang brothers. This caused discontent within the court. In 705, a coup d'etat broke out. The two Zhang brothers were murdered. Empress Wu Zetian was forced to abdicate. The Tang Dynasty was restored. Not long after, she passed away at the age of 81. This marks the end of the most extraordinary life of a woman in Chinese history. She was once an unknown palace maid. She was once taken to a cold temple to await death. But then that same woman rose to the pinnacle of power, becoming the only emperor in over 5,000 years of Chinese history. People called her a tyrant. Others consider her a political genius. Was she a child murderer who seized power? Or were they victims of male historians? Today, we will explore the controversial life of the most powerful woman in Chinese history, Empress Wu Zetian. To understand why Wu Zetian was able to become the most powerful woman in Chinese history, we must go back to a time when she was nobody. No throne, no power, no military. She was just a young girl named Vo Mi Nuong. Wu Meinyang was born in 624, during the flourishing period of the Tang Dynasty. Her father was Von Sihuaik, a wealthy merchant who had helped the Tang Dynasty in its early years. As a result, the Vo family was considered the newly emerging upper class of the empire. However, compared to the long-established noble families in the imperial court, the Vo family's status was still much lower. Perhaps this is what influenced Von Meitnung's thinking from a young age. She understood that her background was not enough to earn her the respect of others. To stand above others, she must possess something truly special. From a young age, Wu Meinyang displayed exceptional intelligence. While girls her age were learning embroidery and domestic skills, she preferred reading. She studies history, read the art of war, studying poetry and literature. They even showed interest in political issues that were traditionally considered a male domain. A folk tale recounts that, as a child, Wu Meinyang was once taken by her father to see a famous war horse. No one dared ride that ferocious horse. While everyone was talking, the little girl Vo Mi Nuong suddenly said, "If you give me an iron whip, a hammer, and a knife, I will make it obey." Everyone was astonished. Those weren't the words of an ordinary girl. It's like a declaration from someone born to conquer. Although this story may have been embellished over time, it reflects how later generations viewed Wu Zetian, an ambitious woman who never accepts defeat. In 637, at the age of 14, Wu Meinyang was selected to enter the imperial harem of Emperor Taizong of Tang, Li Shimin. For many families at that time, this was a great honor, but few people know that the palace gates were like a giant golden cage.